So before that, I was the Chief Financial Officer and the Vice President of the Jenkins Auto Group. It was a completely different life. At 40 years old, I had a son, and now at 50, I have a 9-year-old. So that's kind of what got me into it. I thought maybe I would come in and just help with the business, but found that it was a very unique business where people were happy to see you. And also people, they have a problem, they've been on Google, they're terrified. We come in, we kind of tell them, look, let's just relax, let's get the testing done, let's use our meters, let's use the thermal cameras, and figure out what the issue is. It's crawling underneath buildings from the 1890s and seeing bottles and snakes. It's a lot like being a mortician. You never run out of business. You never run out of clients, except we don't have to deal with anybody who's dead.
All right, Corey, so tell us a little bit about how you got into doing inspections and mold inspections.
Absolutely. So my dad started a company called Home Inspection of Marion County back in the day. And when I joined because he had prostate cancer, and I was at a point in my life where I was getting out of one field and into the other. So joined him. He was able to get completely better, and we started hanging out and doing home inspections. And that was about 11 years ago. And as we did the home inspections, we would come across different, problems that were kind of outside of our area of expertise. So we'd have to call certain people in particular mold, radon, environmental issues. And so over the years, what I did was we were able to get these licenses, which are much different from the home inspection license. And so we started a company called Cornerstone Environmental. And Cornerstone Environmental focuses primarily on mold, radon, and water quality testing. And so we are licensed mold assessors, we are licensed mold remediators, we are licensed radon measurement technicians, and those are the licenses we hold to do those tests, those environmental tests.
It's super important. I mean, like, obviously with real estate myself, I deal with that on a constant basis. We always have to have some type of inspection done, or at least I highly recommend it. So what did you do before you were doing home inspections?
So before that, I was the Chief Financial Officer and the Vice President of the Jenkins Auto Group. I was, it was a completely different life. It was a completely different, and I got out of it, not with the intention of really going into home inspection, really just kind of taking the opportunity. I'd been there since the beginning, and to just kind of reevaluate what I was going to do. And then I had the most wonderful surprise of my life. I had a son. And so at 40 years old, I had a son, and now at 50, I have a 9-year-old. So that's kind of what got me into it, like I said. And then, of course, my dad having the prostate cancer, I thought maybe I would come in and just help with the business, but found that it was a very unique business where people were happy to see you. The car business is very, very different. People come in and they immediately have their guard up, and they believe that they're going to get taken advantage of. But this was one where when people would pay us, they were truly grateful that we were able to help them. And so that was really a unique experience to have happy customers.
And not people that were ready to kill you because the car broke down.
Exactly, right, absolutely. Or, walking in already going, look, I know you're going to rip me off. If you don't give me this price, I'm just going to get up. So it was being able to interact with people. And, a lot of people think home inspection is a negative thing, but, pointing out the positive things about the home. Hey, do you realize these are, 25-year, 30-year shingles? Do you realize, this is a great brand of, AC. And so, people don't do this a lot. Maybe once or twice in their life will they move. So I think, part of our job is to point out the deficiencies, but also part of our job is to say, hey, look, this is completely normal. And because I think a lot of people get upset, or they freak out, or the whole process is stressful. And the home inspection is stressful because they don't see this on a regular basis. And if you can tell them that, look, this is completely normal, it's easy to fix. On the list of 100 things I worry about, this is number 500. So that was interesting. And then, again, as we got into the mold and as we got into the radon, it's more technical. But again, people are always happy to see us because we're there to solve a problem.
Yeah, no, I think that is very true. Now, for the people watching, can you explain what radon is?
So radon is the breakdown of uranium. Uranium is naturally in the soil, especially here in Florida, in Marion County. Marion County is an area where there are high levels of radon. Radon it's the second largest cause of lung cancer after smoking. So it is the breakdown of uranium. So basically, uranium breaks down into what's called radium. And then radium breaks down into radon, which is what we see on our periodic tables back from high school. So we see the radon gas. Radon gas is a noble gas, which means it's very stable. So it stays in its form. It's got a very tight electron shell. So it stays in its current form, very stable. And what happens is it emits what's called daughters. And so these daughters flow from the radon particles, and they attach themselves to dust,
Wow.
to things in the air. And so that then when we breathe it, obviously that's what causes it to get into our lungs. And so when you hear of someone dying of lung cancer and you say, well, they've never smoked a day in their life, more than likely it's probably radon. But the common misconception about radon is it's long-term exposure to very high levels. And so, for example, in the state of Florida, if you have a school, assisted living facility, a mental health facility, change of ownership on any of those, jails, prisons, they're actually statutorily required to be tested. But I always tell people, remember, long-term exposure. Just because you have radon in your home, radon is everywhere. Actually, the average amount of radon just in the air outside is about, they measure it in what's called picocuries, is 1.3 picocuries. The EPA recommends that after 4 picocuries, you get it remediated. And the nice thing about radon is radon mitigation is actually nearly 100% successful. So that's what radon gas is. It's very misunderstood. A lot of people, don't believe it, but it is there. It does exist. And the good news is it's highly easily taken care of, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, no, we don't really deal with it quite as much here in Marion County as they do in South Florida most of the time.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. There are certainly pockets throughout the state that are required, that have to have massive amounts. And, most of our radon business comes from commercial. For example, if you're opening up a school, if a school builds on and so forth, these kind of tests are required on a regular basis. We don't usually see it in residential inspections. We will if the person is a lawyer, a doctor, or from the Northeast, because those are areas where there are very high levels of radon concentration. So most of that is for commercial.
Yeah, I think I've only had people do radon like maybe twice with you guys.
Yes,
I mean, it's just not very common.
No, it isn't common. Now, we also do. You can also test for radon in water. We will do that
Okay.
occasionally on big horse farms. People want to make sure that their horses, when you have a $1 million horse, make sure that the radon is not in the water. So, but again, typically in commercial aspects is where you're going to see radon testing.
Yeah, because I don't want to get sued.
Yes, absolutely. But again, I always tell people long-term exposure, literally 20 years of
wow.
long-term exposure. And the reason it's in our houses and our buildings is because everything is so tight. That building envelope over the years, as we try to keep everything out, we're keeping things like radon in. So
I was over outside of Claremont the other day, and it's pretty hilly in Claremont.
Yes, it is.
It's and there's like pockets of water, and it's just like, I don't know, it's, when you're there, you don't necessarily feel like you're in Florida. I feel like, because of the way that the hills are laying and
No,
stuff.
I agree with you. Especially back in the day, they used to have all of the orange trees and all that. But you're right. Some of those hills are high.
Yes.
And you're coming down, going, "Were we in Florida?"
No, it is. The terrain it kind of changes a lot there anyway. It's kind of weird. But I was just over there, and I was like, holy crap! They like filled in all these like lakes and are like putting all these subdivisions and like creating all of this like, I guess like artificial terrain, I guess, but like using the hills that are there. It was wild anyway. I felt like I was like in like some type of like bad movie going on, because I was just like watching them like take the fill from one place to put it like in the other, and I'm like, what are we doing?
Right.
I'm like, this is crazy. This is getting wild. I'm like, what are we doing, people?
And that area has grown immensely.
Yes.
I mean, it literally, as Orlando continues to just come out. I remember when there was nothing in Claremont. People said, Claire who? And now it's I mean, you'll go there and the number of rooftops are just continuing. So
yeah, no, it was crazy. It was like, and it was out there like more in the desolate part of Claremont, like it always was. Like, you can tell those were like horse farms. There was literally like this huge, I think, blueberry farm, some type of farm over there, and like all around it is like cleared now. And I was like,
even when you get into like towns like back in the day that nobody knew about, Mineola and all of that, massive building going on. In fact, we've got speaking of mold, we've got inspections done in Yalaha and in that area. So
and that never really had anything either.
No, you'd never go to Yalaha, you'd never go to Claremont, You'd never go to Mineola. If anything, you slow down in Mineola because you knew you're probably going to get a ticket. So those areas are just booming.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely crazy. No, I was just really taken back by that the other day when I was down there. And, I see it all the time. I see construction. I see it. But it was just like, you could just tell they just took it all and just went,
yeah.
And it was just like nothing but dirt and construction. And I was like, wow, this is insane. Because we have that here in Ocala, but not to this extent. No,
it is kind of scary when you go, especially, I'm older, so I remember Claremont just being a place you drove through and went, okay, well, I mean, there's Claremont, and now it's like, wow.
I know. They wanted to get rid of the Citrus Tower. They talked about that.
Well, I didn't realize, okay, that's been there forever. And I think they have that, don't they have a Museum of Presidents or something?
Yes.
Yes, there's still some very strange, eclectic things in Claremont that I imagine eventually we'll probably... You demolish.
I don't know. They really tried. I think they made, the problem is the same. When they do this, they end up making it so expensive that I'm like, why is anybody going to go to this? But they like made it like this, the tower, like this, like kind of bougie, like, I don't know, like almost like, in Epcot they have like the orange juice, like, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, the Florida experience.
Yes, yeah. Oh,
It's kind of like that.
Which is pretty good because it used to be surrounded by orange.
I mean, it is cool, but I was like, I think it was like $30 to $50 to go, and I was like, this is ridiculous.
Oh yeah,
like, I would not go to that.
I've always wanted to go to that President's Museum though, because I figured I would either be like, wow, I should have come earlier, or I just wasted all my money.
Yeah, I know it's probably gonna be terrible.
Yeah, probably.
Probably terrible. But no, I just thought it was. I just was really crazy when I was over there the other day. It's completely off topic, but I was just like, oh my God.
That's a lot of money.
It was just the amount that they were building, and like I know where the market's at, and I'm like, I mean, the market's not terrible, but it's not great either. And I'm like, where is this? Like, is this just gonna be like, desolate? Like, because that's what happens. We get to a point. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it.
Yes.
Where where we're building, especially like with your dad being in home inspections, like there's like nothing going on.
Oh yeah, no, especially back in 2007 and 2008.
Yeah.
When, you had all that building, and then all of a sudden you've got nothing.
Nothing.
Banks foreclosing, houses empty.
Yeah, it was crazy. Now, so I want to go back to mold. So now, what made you like really dive into the mold? Because I know that's mostly what you do is like the mold inspections,
it is.
Right?
So we do mold testing, and I find mold to be fascinating because, especially in Florida, we're in one of the best environments for mold, and mold always gets a bad rap because people go on Google and they immediately see that I've got black mold. That's one of the misconceptions that you get, is that when you see mold that it's bad. But mold's everywhere. I mean, the mildew in your bathroom is a type of mold. As soon as you walk outside, you're getting mold. I mean, there are molds everywhere, and they're actually an important part of the air we breathe. Where the problem comes in is when the type, the species, the genus, and the spore count become very, very high. And there are really only two types of black mold. So when people call and say, I have black mold, and we do a lot of commercial mold for companies that are obviously concerned about for their employees. They've seen mold on the walls, they've had a water leak, obviously after hurricanes, things like that. But there are two types of molds, Stachybotrys and Cotomium, and those are your true black molds. All the other molds kind of fall underneath that, but those are the toxic molds. The thing about mold that's interesting is the government's not set any guidelines as to what's toxic and what's not. So there are people who, my dad and I are very fortunate, because when we go into areas where there are lots of Stachybotrys and Cotomium, we have absolutely no reaction at all. There are people who go in and start to have all sorts of reactions, respiratory issues. And the issue with mold is when you Google it, it immediately tells you, all the symptoms that can come from, toxic mold poisoning, which can be anywhere from, obviously respiratory distress, but mental fog. I mean, literally every ailment you have can be mold related. And that's, I think, what makes it scary for people. But I'll be honest with you, most of the testing we do doesn't come back with Stachybotrys, doesn't come back with Cotomium. It's a lot of the same molds that you run into outside, and how our body reacts to it.
What homes mostly have it? Or like if you were to find it in a home?
Most of the homes are, so, in Florida, if you let the relative humidity get too high, I know a lot of people love to keep their air in 82, 83. Those are really, really conducive conditions for mold. And so, we always recommend, if you can, especially when you're going to leave, if you can at least keep it at 78, you want to eliminate that relative humidity, because the mold will come in every time you open your door. It comes in on your shoes, it comes in on your clothes, it comes in on pretty much everything you order. Go to the grocery store, it comes in and it starts to float around, and it looks for places to go, and then eventually what happens is it gets into the AC system, and that's where the real problem begins, because once it gets into the air ducts, nice and cool in there, nice and dark, it's moist, it starts to spread. And so we try to obviously get to it before it becomes a problem. In Florida, we hold both licenses, the mold remediation and the mold assessment license, but you can only do one. The state cracked down on mold assessors and mold remediators, because back in the day, you'd go and assess something, and people would you tell them they have a problem, and oh, by the way, I can fix it for you for $50,000. So the state said you can hold both licenses, but you can only use one. So the only reason we have our remediation license is if you need remediation, and we recommend that you get multiple quotes. We can kind of help you go through those and look at them and say, okay, this is legitimate, this is not, and it just helps our clients to get through the process without being ripped off.
Yeah, literally. I know you have some pretty good people. Like I know my customer used Debbie, and she was really great.
She was. No, we do. We have some, like any business, you've got people who do a really good job all the time, and then you have the scam artists who prey on. Because I'm telling you, if you Google black mold right now, you'll be terrified. And so, we try to deal with, people like Debbie who are, just ethical, going to get the job done, and be finished with it, and not panic the client, because again, mold remediation is highly successful. I mean, after the remediators are done, we come back in and we do a post test just to make sure the mold is gone. And in order for them to move out and move all their equipment out, the mold has to be gone. So again, not the end of the world. Kind of, it's like radon, not the end of the world. It can be fixed, and you can move back in and live in your house. So I think there's that misconception, that it can't be taken care of, but it can. Mold is different though, because you can have immediate effects, whereas with the radon, it's the long-term effects, and that's where people start to get worried. Is as you one day you come in and you don't see it, and the next day, it's now made its way through the roof, through the insulation, and you can see it up and now you see it growing. And we've seen some very, very interesting places. If you can imagine just walking into houses or walking into rooms that are absolutely covered in swirls of mold, or crawling under buildings. And this is public information, but the town of Micanopy had a huge mold problem in their building. Their building was from their town hall and library is a 2-story building from the 1800s, and they had mold issues. I was able to crawl underneath and see actually some of the most beautiful mold formations you've ever seen. It almost looked like when you go into caves and you see the stalagmites and so forth. But it was absolutely fascinating to see the mold growing. And I know that that sounds a little strange, but it really was beautiful. Once you get to look at it, you're like, wow, this is cool. And then of course as you try to swab it, you hope that it's not something terrible. But yeah, we've seen some really interesting things, been in some interesting places, and seen some mold that would definitely scare you. But just because it looks scary in some of these places, I always tell people when we get done with our test, so they say, what do you think? I'm always wrong. It's always the places that are perfect that have problems, and the places where you're like, obviously they have to have a problem, where it's not problematic. So what I like about it is every day it is something new, it's something interesting. And also people, like I said, they're happy to see us. They have a problem, they've been on Google, they're terrified. We come in, we kind of tell them, look, let's just relax, let's get the testing done, let's use our meters, let's use the thermal cameras, and then let's get the results back and figure out what the issue is.
No, whenever we did that mold inspection, which I honestly wasn't really thinking that house was going to have mold.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I really didn't think so. But, it was pretty easy. I think they just ripped out all the drywall, removed the AC. Yes. She sprayed.
It is.
And then they put all the drywall back in, put the AC machine back in, and moved it right on.
And you hate to simplify the process, but that's basically it. The only way to get rid of mold is to rip it out and get rid of it. And then, of course, like you said, fog, spray, they put up containment. There's some places you go into, and, if you didn't know if you didn't know what you were looking at, I always remember that scene in E.T. where, the government comes in and they hook up that thing to his house, and they've got all the, or the respirators on and the masks and so forth. But, you go into some of these containment areas, and it does remind you of a sci-fi movie, a sci-fi horror movie. But again, this is just, that is how you take care of the mold: ripping it out, tearing it out, using scrubbers, using foggers, and then again, like you said, having us test it and then putting it all back together.
Now, so just so people know, how does the mold test actually work?
So what we do is we take an outdoor sample. Our equipment pulls in 15 liters of air for 10 minutes. And so we get 150 cubic meter sample. And what we do is we take an outdoor sample, which is our control sample. That tells us what types of molds are outside. So you've got Penicillium aspergillus, which is one of the most common here in Florida. And you see all the molds that are outside. And then we go to the wet areas, bathrooms, kitchens, laundry rooms, and we take samples there. And then let's say you're seeing black mold on your walls in your master bedroom. We'll obviously take a sample there, an air sample, and a swab sample. So there are 3 types of samples. There's swab, there's air, and there's tape lift. We prefer swab and air just because if the swab comes back with a certain type of mold and the air test comes, then you know that mold is live. And so basically we take the tests, we send them off to the lab. The lab actually reads the entire, what I like about our lab is they read the entire slide. Some labs will read 25% of it and then multiply it by 4 and tell you that's your problem. So when you get the test back, it tells you a lot more information than you really want to know, but it will list every type of mold that we found. It will list what kind it is. So let's say it's Penicillium aspergillus. And then it will give you, more importantly, the spore count. So for example, Penicillium aspergillus in this room is probably 200 to 700 spores per cubic meter. When you look at it and it's 90,000, you know you've got an issue.
That was that house. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That was crazy.
It really is. And again, so when we come in, we're using our the mold equipment, but we're also using our moisture meters. We're using thermal cameras, trying to determine, okay, that way when it comes back, the mold test comes back, we know, okay, near the air handler, the moisture levels were extremely high. And so we expect that that's the issue. And, people say, what is the largest cause of mold? Well, obviously, broken pipes, leaking pipes, things like that. But actually, it's your AC unit. The AC unit is really the primary component that's going to cause mold. And, I can wander off into all sorts of rabbit holes with this. But, a lot of people who call, one of the first questions I ask them is, have you recently had your ducts cleaned? Because, when the guy comes to clean the ducts, shows you the great amount of stuff that he's gotten out of it. You think that's good. The problem is duct cleaning is not a regulated industry. And a lot of times what will happen is they will actually stir up the spore count and cause more problems. So either you think you're doing something good, and unless they use an antimicrobial, you're actually causing more issues than if you didn't. And in case you want to know, I have not had my ducts cleaned because I'm kind of worried about, what are they going to disturb? So that's just something to keep in mind. If you're going to do duct cleaning, make sure that they're using antimicrobial, and ideally it's best to have a mold remediation company do your duct cleaning.
Let's talk a little bit about Marion County. So have you always lived here?
So I moved here when I was 5 from upstate New York. I lived in Cortland, New York, which is outside of Syracuse. We moved here for my dad's job. So I was 5 years old. I went to South Ocala Elementary. I went to Osceola for middle school, and I went to Forest High School. And I always tell people, you're old when the high school you went to is no longer a high school because, of course, they've moved out on merit camp. So our family's been here since 1979. Okay. And we've been part of the community since 1979. I've had the honor of being the president of the Humane Society, the president of the Domestic Violence Center. I currently serve on the Advent Health Board of Trustees. So we've been engaged in the community, and my brother and sister are Florida crackers. They are natives. They were born right here at what was MRMC. So yes, unfortunately, I don't remember fortunately, I don't remember anything about upstate New York, except that I see pictures of me in what looks like very, very, very cold, miserable conditions. Other than that, that's all I remember.
You remember it being really cold?
I remember being really cold. Really, really cold. I remember the trip down from Florida when we got into Florida and we saw palm trees, and that's my first memory of Florida is my mom and dad pointing out to me as we drove down, we're in Florida now, look at the palm trees. And so I have been here I'm now 50 years old, and so you can do the math. I would try, but I'd have to take my fingers, and I take my socks off and use my fingers and toes.
Yeah, no, it's a long time.
It is a long time.
And Marion County's changed a lot.
Marion County has, So talking about Claremont, I was just thinking about the massive amount of apartment complexes and the massive amount of people who are coming here, and you probably, I don't know how long you've been here, but you probably remember back in the day, going down 200. When we moved here, I remember when they built the Paddock Mall. Paddock Mall was not built. In fact, you're familiar with Marion County at all, there's a SunTrust that sits right on the corner of 200 and now the new flyover that goes, you can get to 40 and 27. And I always used to think, wow, that bank is so far out there. Now, of course, that's basically the center of town. So, but it's interesting to see, the traffic. I know my brother, who grew up here, went to Bellevue High School and then moved, recently came back, and we had all been complaining about the traffic. And he said, I thought you guys were over-exaggerating, but wow. I mean, it's just, I'm adding 10 or 15 minutes. And so I think, we've seen a lot of change, and, we've seen, change is not always good, but I don't really know anything else except Marion County. And all I know is that the people here are phenomenal. The quality of life is phenomenal. The weather is phenomenal. And I don't plan on moving anywhere else. So.
No, I know. I mean, it has changed a lot. I mean, I'm not originally from here. My wife actually is generationally from here. Her mom's family is.
Okay. You rarely find the typical Florida crackers.
Yes.
Usually it's somebody who has moved from. So that's interesting because they're.
And I'm kind of pretty much generationally Florida. So like my grandmother, they were Tejano, so they were migrant workers actually.
Okay.
And so they ended up coming to Naples, and they were there, and they had the rest of their kids. My grandmother was born in Texas, but she was very little when they were there, so they ended up moving to Naples, really just South Florida in general. And they lived there, and they picked tomatoes and did what they did, and then they would go to Indiana in the summer and then come back, and vice versa, whatever. But like pretty Florida. But my wife's family is like 1800s Ocala.
Oh wow! See,
Yeah.
it's always cool to talk to them too, because I mean, although the Paddock Mall wasn't here when we got here, they can tell you about or their grandparents can tell you about the dirt roads, and I think it's cool to see the old pictures of Marion County, and kind of remember back when I moved here, downtown there. Can't remember the name of the store, but it was almost like a 5 and dime store where you would go in and had a soda fountain, and now I'm dating myself big time. But there also used to be the Brahma down on Pine, which was a restaurant and so forth that a lot of people like your wife and her family would know. They just, you can always say, "Do you remember the Brahma?" And yeah, like I said, that dates you, but no, it's changed. And I have a 9-year-old son, and this is just my family's here. It's just a great place to grow up, have a family, and also of course retire. I mean that's
Everybody likes to retire to Marion County.
Yes, exactly. That's the nice thing. I don't have to move.
Yeah.
I don't have to move.
There's plenty to retirement to pick from. Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny. I talk to my mother-in-law, and I'll be like, what's this? What was this building at some point? Like, what was the story?
Yes.
What happened? She's like, oh, this used to be this, and this used to be that, and this is how this was, and and I'm like, okay, interesting. Because I mean, it is kind of interesting to like see what it was before, what they had before. Like, I know, where is it now? Where Betty Cakes and all of that is over there.
Yes.
That was Publix.
It was at one time it was actually Six Gun Territory.
Yes.
I remember going to Six Gun Territory and watching the actors fall off the roof. I mean, and taking the train in. And a lot of us remember Silver Springs back in the day when it was really just a bustling, all of those little shops that used to be there. I mean, it was just, it was bustling, and then of course it kind of went into decay. And like you said, I mean, the roads that just were not ever there. And no, it is interesting. Marion County has a lot of history, and it's interesting when somebody, like you said, somebody can say, hey, that used to be the old Rheinauers, or it used to be. So no, I enjoy hearing those stories, and as I get older, I find myself being the one who actually is telling those stories, but it's interesting that and for those people who've been here, like you said, generationally, they've seen some unbelievable change.
Yeah, no, I agree. Six Gun Territory was probably pretty cool. Like, it's kind of funny because my grandmother later part of her life, ended up dating. They never got married, but I guess they were kind of married. Right. They were together for quite a while. And he actually used to be one of the ones that would jump out those windows.
Oh yes, it was great.
It was super cool.
For a kid, I mean, you're driving on a train into a western town, and I mean, they're doing gunfights and they're falling off. And then of course, I have fond memories of Silver Springs. Of course, the glass bottom boats are still there, but I remember there was one kiosk where you could get an oyster and there'd be a pearl in it.
Yeah.
And then they had I don't know if anybody remembers the old car collection there. They had the best old car. I mean, it was unbelievable. I couldn't fully appreciate it at that age, but I'd love to see that again. And a lot of us remember Wild Waters.
Yeah.
Going down, the Silver Bullet. I think was it the Silver Bullet?
I think so. Yeah.
The Hurricane. I mean, all of these places that eventually went into decay, and of course now Wild Waters doesn't even exist.
Well, honestly, I think what happened with Florida history in general is Disney World became a thing.
It did.
And I mean, honestly, it's kind of funny because I really love old Florida history. My grandmother's actually like in old Florida movies, which is pretty cool. Like in Naples, like Collier County movies, like she's
really?
like, there's some of them she's in them, yeah. And so it's just kind of funny. But because of that, I kind of went through like a phase of like looking at all of that because I was like, I found her movies. I knew they existed, so I watched them, and then I was like, well, I want to look at the other ones. And so you start like looking at what each park, like Rainbow Springs, had, like with the where they had like the leaf boats, and my mother-in-law talks about like going on the leaf gondolas.
Yes, I think they filmed Tarzan there.
That was in Silver Springs.
Oh, Silver Springs, that's right. And then my son goes to school in Micanopy. Okay. And of course, that's where they filmed Doc Hollywood.
Yep.
And it really is. It's some of these smaller towns, McIntosh, Micanopy, like you said, the Springs, just the history there. And
yeah, no, but I feel like it's interesting because if you look at like Disney, like the beginning of Disney, how much he copied
Yes.
all of those, certain things that he pulled from each one of those, like amusement parks
Yes.
that were at the time. Because I really like amusement parks. I don't really know what else to call them.
I think I remember. I think remember at Silver Springs they used to have the Jungle Cruise, and I
Yes.
think that, I mean, and at Disney they've you're right, they've got. But you're right. I mean, I know this was a destination, and I'm sure someone probably can, you know, call in, write in, email in, and tell us that he probably came to Ocala,
Probably.
scoped out a lot of this, and thought, okay, I can do this here.
No, I like when I started like doing all of the research, like and looking at that, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then I mean, it just really shut all of it down, is what it did.
It did. It did.
It did.
As far as Disney, you know, people ask me, well, what do you think about Disney? All I say is, God bless the people who come here because it keeps us from having a state income tax. It keeps our taxes low. And I always try to make sure that if they're from out of state, that I don't honk at them at the light, because keep remembering that I don't have a state income tax because of them. So please come through Ocala, spend your money, eat in our restaurants, buy our gas, and continue on down.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I thought that too. I should think that whenever I go to Orlando, oh my God, I was down there the other day at IKEA, and there was this van, and I'm like, if you're a Florida person, then you understand, like, you go down to iDrive or like anywhere in Orlando and you see like the PM rental car.
Yes.
You're like, oh God, help me, here we go. And this van could not drive at all. And I wanted to scream because I was like, but I'm like, it's a rental. Here we are. Right. It's Orlando.
It's a family they've saved up to come here.
Yep.
And like I said, we don't have a state income tax.
So we got to be happy about it.
We got to be happy about it. I'm driving a rental car right now. I know what that PM means. My garage moved in front of my car, and it was a long story, but yes. But no, God bless Disney, and God bless the tourists. And if you hear somebody honking, it's not me.
It's not you. No, oh my God. They make me crazy though when I go down there. But it's just like I have to take a deep breath and think about it. So towards the end of my podcast, what I always ask, if somebody's looking to do what you do, Corey, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, if you like talking to people, if you like seeing new and different things, if you're not afraid of some pretty hairy spaces and places, because, you know, it's not all just setting up equipment and so forth. It's crawling underneath, you know, 18 buildings from the 1890s, and, you know, seeing bottles and snakes and so forth and so on. It certainly is it's a fascinating business. It's a lot like being a mortician. You never run out of business. You never run out of clients, except we don't have to deal with anybody who's dead. And it's really kind of a niche that, you know, I don't think you run into a lot of mold assessors. So I think if you're interested in science and you're interested in dealing with people and you really want to, you know, to help people kind of navigate through this issue, one, we're in the right state, and two, mold assessment and really environmental testing it's interesting. Not for everybody, but certainly, you know, I think for those who are interested in never having a dull moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And it's funny that you said something that's not dead. You're dealing with something that's very much alive.
Very, very much alive. Let me tell you what, we have some old marketing material from back in the day, you know, mold, a growing concern, which is true. It's always growing.
Did you see that we have mold in hay?
Absolutely.
Like there's some like almost like The Last of Us, like the show that I was talking about.
Yes.
Like something like that. I guess that goes into cows and like.
It is. It's fascinating as you look at the different types, and then when you look at what it can do, and again, you're talking about something that's so microscopic. It can be 3 to 4 microns, and again, like I said. But it doesn't get a bad rap, because, you know, mold is good. It's good for us. We need a certain amount of it in the air. It's just when it gets to that toxic level, which is usually we as humans causing the problem, because we've kept our ACs too high. We've turned off our ACs. We haven't done preventative maintenance. So, but yeah, not all mold is bad mold.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that. Is there anything that you want to add? Anything new you have coming? Anything excited before we wrap up?
No. I think I appreciate you inviting us. We actually just came out with some new testing for after fire remediation.
Oh, okay.
And so now we have actually just Friday, we just came out with it. Our lab's been working on it for a long time. And it's essentially, we will do what's called ghost swabs, and we can detect soot, char, and some of the after effects of fires. So once a remediation company, because a lot of remediation companies specialize in mold, but they also do fire restoration. And so we now have the ability to test to make sure that after fire restoration, there's not char, there's not soot that's causing issues. So it's always, and that's the other thing about it, you asked about people getting into it. It's always evolving and developing. New technologies are coming out, new tests are coming out, which are just, in my opinion, just really, really, really cool to be able to find this. You know, we have particle ID testing, which I could talk about for hours. That, I mean, literally, you know, there are inkjet droplets in the air right here. there's newspaper from, magazines in the air. And so we have what's called particle ID testing, separate and apart from our mold, which, tells you what kinds of cellulose are in the air. And so I find that to be...
What do you use that for?
So that's mainly used in commercial applications where they can't find, let's say they don't have mold, maybe they have fiberglass, maybe they have insect fragments, but those reports are so fascinating to read.
Interesting.
At first you kind of go, I don't know if I should take a breath, but who would think that inkjet droplets or from your printers are in the air? And so it's fascinating to read those reports and say, wow, this is kind of what's in my house.
I'm like, oh God, we live in toxicity.
Well, yes, absolutely, exactly. I always tell people, when they say, all this bad, I always say, the stuff that we test for is stuff that kills you, and it does. But my 8 or 9 Diet Pepsis will kill me long before any of the mold, radon, or anything else that I come into.
Yes, I have experienced Corey's obsession with soda firsthand.
Yes.
One of my customers really got him addicted to the Dr. Pepper strawberry.
It's, I was thirsty, and it was Dr. Pepper, strawberries and cream. Not normally a drink that I would have. They offered it to me. I was embarrassed because I actually took a second one, and now it hasn't replaced my Diet Pepsi. I meant to bring a cold one for Gabby and I today, but forgot. But yes, I'm a notorious soda drinker. So
yeah, I feel like that's the joke that you and I always talk about now.
It
is hilarious.
It is. As I was leaving my house, I actually saw I saw the 4 or 5, because Memorial Day is coming up. The soda's on sale. And,
there you go.
And my son, who is a purist, he only drinks milk and water, will occasionally ask me for a sip because he thinks it's really, really good. So anyway, big plug there for Dr. Pepper, strawberries and cream.
Yeah, I'm like, if you haven't tried it, Corey,
if you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it. Actually, I probably shouldn't recommend it because it's sometimes hard to find.
I'm sure. And watch them not make it anymore or something.
They always do that.
They always do that.
Right.
People really like the Oreo one too.
Oh, I haven't tried that.
I don't think they still do it, but there was like a thing where it was like Oreo, and I'm like, it sounds disgusting.
And that's why I'm going to keep Diet Pepsi as my main drink, just in case they do that, because, if you drink 10 of those a day and then stop, that'd be horrible. So I appreciate you inviting me.
Of course,
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to see you. Always a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, Corey. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and look forward to another great one next week.